It did not go to the masses. It remained to the periphery, only to few people. But if the manufacturing base in India grows and our GDP grows to 10 to 12% because of the manufacturing base, it will bring, the benefits I'm going to tell you is going to percolate down the line to all and sundry, all and masses, which will raise the standard of all people in this country. The question that was asked to me in an interview, that what about the backlash to outsourcing that you are feeling in IT? Will it happen in pharma also? I think there are two aspects of this. One, it does not take away so many jobs, so it doesn't have such a political hue as you can see in IT. Second is that major population of the country is paying for this cost. So if few people are sacrificed, jobs are sacrificed for benefit of the whole country, I think it will not make that much of political mileage can be drawn out of it. The second part is even in IT, if you have seen the McKinsey Global Institute carried out a study on outsourcing, and they have said that every dollar which is outsourced, there is a value addition of 30 cents. Out of that, 60% goes to the innovator, the outsourcer, and 10% to the supplier. So if that money can be utilized for the benefit of the people for upgradation of their skill, I think this could have been dealt with differently. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for giving the opportunity. I still feel that, and strongly feel that Prahlad's, I am a big follower of him, as Professor Prahlad, saying that India has an opportunity to grow by more than 10% every year over a period of time, and I believe that is possibility. Only thing we have to believe in ourselves that we can do it. Thank you very much.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers, particularly Professor Milind Sahani, for inviting me to be here. Well, when he first asked me, then I thought I'll give this lecture because some time back I had prepared this lecture and has given it, but when I was reviewing what I have said at that time, most of it looked outdated, so it actually took me a lot of time to prepare for this lecture. Well, I am the last lecturer in this one, and being at the end is an advantage as well as a disadvantage. I mean, the advantage is that you can just summarize what others have said. I mean, they're excellent talks, and then you can say, I have nothing much to add, and then you can go and sit down in the audience. You have also the opportunity, because you are talking now with the knowledge of what others have said, and you can say, try to have a differential approach. Of course, the slides are already made, there's nothing much I can change. And there is also a disadvantage that your time is cut short. The chairman told me that I had to finish this as fast as possible. So let us try. I think there have been excellent talks since the morning. I mean, since the morning, talking about auto, talking about pharma, and various other things. But I had an opportunity to study about India, particularly the logistics, because in 2003, CIA has asked me to write a paper for their conference on logistics. So at that time, I had to really learn about logistics in India. And recently, I had done a project for Singapore government on food supply chain. And believe me, it really opened my eyes. I mean, like everybody else here, I used to work on auto supply chains, pharma, IT, and so on. But when I studied the food supply chain, it really opened my eyes. So some of these thoughts which I had, I will share with you in the short time that's available. Let's see, what is competitiveness? I mean, we are talking here of competitiveness of nations, competitiveness of firms. What is that There is a lot of debate about this. I mean, if you look at any newspaper, you can see India is the outsourcing best destination for education, best education for medical tourism, best education. Go on. You mentioned what India is the best education. And people mention the same thing about China. It's like basically the manufacturing is all done in China, and it is India versus China and so on. But I would like to beg to differ from people that it's not, if India were to follow a model, it's not China. It has to be the US. Anyway, we'll come to that at the end of this. And there is also a lot of debate, even yesterday, about services versus manufacturing. Whether, in the heydays of IT, 3-4 years ago, people said, look, we should leapfrog into the services, we should concentrate on IT, we are the best, and we should forget about manufacturing. Well, I think we'll talk about that a little bit. It's not services versus manufacturing. It is services and manufacturing. That is the one that gives you the global advantage to India. So competitiveness is at various levels, at the individual corporate firms, at the industry level, and also at the national level. Ben Porter has a book, Competitiveness of Nations or something. And there is other economists like Krugman who say nations don't compete, firms do, but we're not getting into those debates. But the policies of the nations, they do affect the firms. For example, the nation's economic import, export, and other policies, the tariffs, customs regulations, trade agreements, these are all affect the firm's competitiveness. On the other hand, the competitiveness of the individual firms, that will bring credit to the nations. For example, the good work of the IT companies, the 5 companies, TCS, Wipro, Infosys, Satyam, and so on, has made India the global IT hub. I mean, it is the sweat of those companies that India is reaping today, and it has become a vital outsourcing hub. So, I mean, it works both ways. And when you talk of an industry competitiveness, you have to talk of both export competitiveness and the domestic competitiveness. But from many discussions, what I have seen, people are worried about FDI, people are worried about export, and so on, leaving the domestic market. Let's face it, how much is the FDI into India? It's 4%. It's 4% of your GDP is the FDI, and you are worried so much about it leaving the domestic competitiveness. Well, this is the figure which explains what I am saying. You have the economic environment. How do I? Yeah, you have the economic environment in which you have several industry verticals. I mean, it could be auto, pharma, food, and so on. And each vertical has several supply chains. I mean, if you have high-tech supply chain, you have Dell supply chain, you have HP, you have IBM supply chains, and so on. And each supply chain has its companies. I mean, it could be suppliers, OEMs, distributors, and so on. Now, there is a relationship between them. Whatever happens in the environment is affects here. The policies of the nations affect the company's competitiveness. I mean, if something happens in the industry like mad cow disease or something, that will affect the companies and so on. So there is an interrelationship between them. Well, another thing that's happening is the so-called global versus digital. I mean, the internet, you have, I mean, it has been said here that, the China is the factory of the world, India is something of the world, and US is the brain of the world, and so on. So basically, these global supply chains are being talked about. But I don't know how many people really understood what it means to be global. I mean, if you're going from, say, Hyderabad to Bombay, you buy a ticket and go. But the same journey from Hyderabad to New York, well, it makes it immensely complex. You have to get a visa, you have to have a passport, you have to have a foreign exchange, and so on. So when you're transferring goods across borders, the logistics becomes immensely complex. What people talk about is hard infrastructure, like the roads, the ports, the vessels, transport, and so on. But there is a lot of paper documentation that is involved. and there is the customs clearance procedures. And these, believe me, will take billions and billions of dollars and number of days and sometimes weeks. Well, so with all this introduction, the aim is to identify manufacturing sectors for domestic and export competitiveness. And I'm going to be different from others saying that agriculture and food processing is a sector that the government and everybody should be concentrating on. But I'm not saying the other sectors are not important, but organized retail is another sector. I mean, food processing sector is $50 billion. IT is 18 billion. Auto is 8 billion. So we are here, and the organized retail is $200 billion. So in terms of priorities, which should be your priority? And manufacturing related services. Any product, the price you pay is 10% of the product in the life cycle. 90% of the cost is after you have bought the product. Like you have a car, I mean the first, whatever, 4 lakhs, 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs, 14 lakhs, whatever you pay is the first 10%. And each year you are going to spend as much as the product price, year after. But after-sales services, or the services related to manufacturing, I mean there are several: financial, insurance, gas, repair and maintenance. All these things, they're all neglected. Neglected in the following sense. I mean, here everybody must have studied how to design a manufacturing plant. The factory floor, scheduling, SAP, I2, application, software, and so on. But how many of you have you ever thought of designing a repair center? If you have a car repair, you go to the garage, give it for service. The returned vehicle is as good as the mechanic who handled it. There is no automation, there is no software, there is no after sales. Probably there is an after sales parts that are available. So there is a lot of benefits. I mean, I'm not the only one who is saying it. You go to Accenture, Deloitte, everybody says that now after sales is the biggest thing that can happen. Well, India has bad logistics infrastructure. I mean, this is given. And if you want to promote your trade and so on, and if you wait till all the infrastructure gets better, then it is going to be year 3000. But in the meanwhile, how do you use like IT? How do you automate your customs and trade documentation? And use the processes a little bit and make your logistics better. And also top it up with smart economic policies, like number of free trade agreements has grown in the recent years. There are 170 regional trade agreements in 2001. I couldn't get the data, the recent data. And 40% of the global trade is through them. And after 2001, there are any number of trade agreements that have happened. So it's important, if you want to be a global player, you have to have trade agreements. So if you are designing a global supply chain, it's not enough you have lean manufacturing, the best of the trade, and you are the best. Well, your environment should help you by having free trade agreements. You should have the other IT proneness to beat your logistics, bad infrastructure, and so on. So the external, internal IT, logistics infrastructure, and the economic policies also play a role in addition to the manufacturing proneness here. So if you want to capture the global trade, I think you have to think different in all these directions. So accordingly, the contents of my lecture are benchmarking the current state of Indian manufacturing. I thought somebody would do this so that I can skip, but I will quickly go through this. And where can Indian manufacturing grow from here, from this one, and defining a strategy for enhancing manufacturing competitiveness. And I'll conclude this with, well, it is 692 billion. and on PPP terms, 3 trillion. In US dollars, it's 10th largest economy and 4th largest in terms of PPP. Well, agriculture is 21%, manufacturing 28%, and services 51%. And the workforce-wise, 60% of the workforce is in agriculture, and manufacturing is 17%, and services is 23%. Now, of course, the workforce and 60% in agriculture includes the unemployed. And logistics costs in India, anywhere between 10 to 20% because whatever, it depends on the product you're moving. In US, it has come down from 15 to 9.8 in a matter of 5 to 6 years. Very high in developing countries. In fact, in China, it is 20%. And China's 50% of the GDP of China is in its inventories. So India's share in its industry is very low. I mean, it's 25%. And you have, in terms of GDP, you have 1/5 of the population, 1/60th of the GDP, global GDP. So, I mean, you have to find ways to increase the industry. This one, I mean, through whatever. Why is manufacturing is important? Because 75% of the working population, that is 600 million, has education, middle school and below. So only labor-intensive manufacturing and organized retailing. I mean, these are the two sectors that can provide the employment in adequate this one. I mean, I'm not saying this out of the hat, but there is an evidence. The next slide shows that experience from Europe, America, Japan, and other tiger economies, I mean, in the last 2 centuries, have shown wealth creation was done only through export-oriented manufacturing. Well, China manufacturing sector is 40% of GDP, and retailing is growing at 30%. Well, this is from McKinsey, this one. If you look at any of these countries, going through, for example, Japan, it was growing in 70s. Export is